Hello, hello, hello. This is your Bull Shrimp once again, and here we are in another episode of our Art with Adventure, and we're gonna go and grind my art style and my artwork today once more. And here we are, and yeah. So far, last time that we did, last episode that I did with this, with my live stream, we're almost done with the artwork already for our concept art. So to show you guys what happened, sorry, okay, to show you guys what happened, put the let's tab to the section. Okay, the clip studio. Okay, so yeah, right now we're having a wonderful elements and blending all around. Still a bit bland on the background over here for the buildings. I might add some few more colors. Maybe a bit of gray or bluish gray or a bit reddish stuff. Just to add a bit of a flavor here. Maybe this rocks, I'll probably turn it to a bit reddish. I'll just use a blending brush or a, what's it called again? The opacity? No, no, no. It's either multiply or overlay. Yeah, it, it depends. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm gonna do today. Maybe change the color of that barrel, add some few more elements, maybe some rocks on the beach. I don't know. But yeah, overall it's getting really really good. I might probably finish this today. Hopefully. Mm, I might also do something with the sky. Thinking it's a bit of more. I don't know. I'm not very sure what I could do more with the sky. Maybe make the clouds a bit more prominent. Mm, I'll see. I'll look at some reference right now. Before I do anything, maybe I should create a new window for this. And put this in my other monitor. Because my other monitor has a better better screen for this kind of for designing, and I can see the colors better. Yeah, I think this is good. Looks good, really good. Mm, I might get rid of some of the line arts on the background, especially the rocks at the back. Yeah, okay, and yeah, let's see what I can improve with this artwork, and I'll play around maybe because I want to look for ways to improve this particular art. And I explained as I explained before, my skills are not very good yet, and I'm very new with this concept art thing. So just be patient with me. Just a bit. Yeah, just be patient with me, and I'll probably improve more if you're a very professional artist out there and watching this video. So anyway, so yeah, I think that's all I could talk about my artwork for now. Let us just oh yeah, probably the leaves over here. hmm I'll probably add some greens on this. Mm, yeah, just to make it look like there is a foreground on this part. Yeah, I'll add some more green. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyways, let's go to our adventure for today. Once again, let's nope. I'm sorry about this. That's from work. Should have get rid of that earlier. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm in my browser. And we're back to the dead mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So we're now in chapter 36, volume 2. I'm still, if I'm not wrong, yeah, we're still in volume 2. And last time, it talked about a lot of things about their uh, new place that they just went, stayed in right now. They managed to rebuild some of the buildings and some of the stuff and discovered a lot of uh, new people that they manage to befriend. So most of them are, yeah, actually all of them are undead, but the main character is a undead mage, so he can talk to them and communicate with his undead, and manage to befriend them. And it's so interesting that you can read some things like this, like it's country building, world building stuff, and the build up for relationships and some of the characters that you will discover for all the way the all the way to the latest chapters. They're very interesting characters, and I can't wait to hear about the vampires of this story, because there's some really interesting vampires. I remembered the reason why I went and checked out this light novel or web novel, or depending on what term you're using for this. But for this particular light novel that I'm reading right now, the reason why I went and read this is because of the vampire tag on it. Yeah, I'm a big sucker for vampire stories, so I went and click this on because this is one of the most popular vampire light novels for Japanese story. So I checked it out, and it's really interesting. So we'll hear more about the vampires in these coming chapters, and I'll look for you guys should look forward to it, because there are some really interesting characters for the vampires, and there will be some very good developments with them, and also for the future when the build up of their country will be very interesting. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to spoil more about the story, so let's just get to the story already. And anyway, by the way, also, you can read this in Novels.pl. To those who want to continue the story after listening to my video
Chapter
today. Sorry about that. I forgot to mute that. But yeah. So check out the website, because it's a very wonderful website. It provides audiobook to you if you want to listen to it, or if you have a lot of time in your hand and likes to read without you being narrated or being listening to audiobooks. You could also read this. It's a very wonderful website. So, and when you make an account, you can also save the novels that you read here or you want to read as a bookmark. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with this website. So anyway, enough of the talking, and let's get to this art style and audiobooks going. Okay.
to 36, Spartan training supported with praise. The most peaceful, prosperous age that the world of Lambda ever experienced, the age of the gods. The ones who ended it were the demon king Eugenides and the countless evil gods that followed him. The one who cursed the water, earth and even the air, turning them into poison that ruined living creatures, the evil god of cursed poison. The master of massacre who knew of nothing but hunting and competing, the one who taught the people the pleasure of drawing blood, the evil god of mad slaughter. The one who toyed with all forms of life, the one who created numerous evil synthetic beasts, the evil god of distortion. The one who corrupted the people with immoralities that had never existed in Lambda before, the evil god of ruinous greed. Their leader was destroyed by the gods and the champions, but there are still many evil gods lurking in this world. One of those, the evil god of distortion, had a subordinate god, Hukaka, the evil god of joyful life. There was a vampire community obeying this evil god and receiving his divine protection. Hukaka was an evil god who taught his followers that toying with life was the ultimate pleasure, a way of proving oneself to be a superior being. If someone begs for their life, toy with them, give them hope and force them to obey before finally pushing them off the cliff of despair and taking their life. If there are insects who desire power, give them a power they do not want that leads them to ruin and make them scream in regret that they do not need power. If someone is proud of their strength, rob them of that strength. Tear off their limbs, crush their eyes and rip out their tongues. Make them into nothing more than insects that are only capable of crawling on the ground. Only by doing that can you become superior beings. Only by creating a pile of the weak beneath your feet and trampling over it can you reach a higher place. The vampires had lost Vida, their goddess of life and love. For Hukaka, who advocated such teachings. Converting them into his followers may have been one of those pleasures for him as well. 100,000 years later, those who followed the evil god of joyful life were a prominent force even among the other vampires who had begun to follow the evil gods. There were over 100 noble-born vampires, ruled by 3 pure breeds who possessed tremendous power. Below them were countless subordinate vampires and human followers who desired eternal life. If one included the undead, monsters and even the groups of mercenaries and bandits who were not even aware that they were serving as the vampires' pawns, it would be foolish to try to count their numbers. Their military strength was equivalent to that of a large country, and their influence was so great that they would be able to manipulate such large countries. Now then, the first topic of discussion is the aforementioned Damp. Berkine, the one speaking was Berkine, one of the 3 pure-breed vampires ruling the community. His outward appearance was that of a man of around 20 years of age with delicate features consisting of thin lines. He seemed like someone who might gather sons and daughters of noble families to host tea parties and balls. Damp. Ah, the one who was born between one of your subordinates and one of the guards. Female vampire. The one who replied was a woman who looked to be over 20 years old. Her attractive figure and beautiful face would be enough to conquer any man if she smiled, but they were clouded by a somewhat dull-looking gaze. The dress that revealed much of her chest and left her back exposed was extravagant, but in bad taste. Rather than looking like a noble lady, she looked like a high-class prostitute that noble families might pay for. Both the mother and child are working hard in my castle with their backs stuck together, moving around with 8 limbs. Female vampire. Turnisha, isn't that from 100 years ago? Berkine, then are you talking about the one that came from the stomach of that beast person? Didn't you kill that one? Along with its whole clan. Female vampire, that one was from 500 years ago. Berkine. Turnisha, the one engaging in this 2-person comedy act with Berkine, was another one of the pure-breed vampires. She was the 3rd most powerful in this community, and recognized as the most powerful female vampire. The Damp I am referring to is the one born at Gubberman's place between one of the subordinates in a very low position and a dark elf. Berkine. Ah, the one at Gubberman's place. Now that you mention it, something like that did happen there, didn't it? So, where is Gubberman's? I don't see him around. Turnisha. Berkine and Turnisha spoke a 3rd name, Gubberman. He was the last of the pure-breed vampires ruling the community. But even though Turnisha looked for him, she couldn't see him at all. Lord Gubberman is absent today because he is busy with other matters. Vampire. The pale-faced noble-born vampire who had spoken was likely one of Gubberman's followers. He was trembling violently, unable to endure Turnisha's glare. What did you say? He's absent today as well? I'm only absent for 9 out of 10 meetings, but that Jizn has already missed 20. Hurry up and bring that shetty old man out here. Turnisha, please forgive me. Lord Gubberman is dealing with some matters at hand, and he asked me to apologize to you on his behalf, Turnisha-sama and Berkine-sama. Gubberman's follower, stop making excuses. Do you want to turn into materials for one of my creations? Turnisha. Turnisha looked as if she would pierce the trembling noble-born vampire with her fangs at any moment. Berkine and the other noble-born vampires chuckled at this scene. Even their own brethren didn't deserve their compassion. Let us leave it at that. We have already received a report on the details, you see. Berkine. Unlike subordinate vampires, creating noble-born vampires took a considerable amount of effort, and though it was very pleasant to see disputes between Gubberman's faction and Turnisha's faction, it could cause the community to disintegrate. Berkine enjoyed the spectacle for a little while before putting a stop to it. Is that so? Turnisha. Yes. As you know, Valen was executed by one of Gubberman's subordinates. The body was disposed of in a way that it will never come back to life. And I have heard that the religious fanatics in the mid were used to burn the Dark Elf Mother at the stake. Berkine. Wow, considering that shetty old man has nothing in his head except filling up his collection, his subordinates perform pretty well, don't they? So what happened to the Damp? Turnisha. Apparently he managed to slip away. Berkine. Huh? Turnisha. As Turnisha's face twisted in surprise, Berkine raised a corner of his mouth and continued his explanation with a pleased look on his face. He was never found, but as he was still a baby of breastfeeding age, it was thought that he would be unable to survive on his own and was left alone. I do not know how he did this, but as a child not even 3 years of age, he apparently gathered several hundred ghouls under his control. And when the humans dispatched a large extermination force after him, he apparently led the ghouls across the boundary mountain range before the extermination force could reach him. What he did and how he did it is a complete mystery. As Berkine spoke, not only Turnisha, but all of the other vampires showed all sorts of reactions. There were some who were half laughing, thinking that this was some kind of joke. Others were silently dumbfounded. Others still were confused, wondering if they had misheard something. You've got to be kidding me. Turnisha. The only one to respond with anger was Turnisha. So you're saying that someone let him go thinking that he would die, then helplessly watched as this damp gathered hundreds of followers and crossed the boundary mountain range? What the hell was he thinking? No, does he even have brains to think with in the first place? Kill that guy, right now. Turnisha bared her fangs in anger. She wasn't scared of the damp. She simply understood that the vampires had ruled the world in the shadows for 100,000 years because of the evil god's divine protection and because they had prepared their battles in a way that they would win before fighting them. She wouldn't feel this sense of danger facing a mere damp raw human. However, there were pure-breed vampires residing beyond the boundary mountain range. Beings that stood equal to themselves. They had shown almost no movement at all during the last 100,000 years, but if they were to begin moving, it was certain that the vampire community here would have its existence endangered. She is right, Berkine-sama, please execute the one responsible immediately and leave the damp to us. Vampire, no, please leave this to me, Carmen. Another vampire, I will do my best to live up to your expectations, Berkine-sama and Turnisha-sama. Yet another vampire, and then the vampires, seeing this as an opportunity to add some achievements to their own records, raised their hands one by one even though nobody had asked them to. It was impossible for a noble-born vampire to become a pure-breed vampire through achievements, but if High-Hierarch acknowledged them, they would receive his divine protection. If they received this divine protection, they would rise 1 or 2 steps above the other noble-born vampires in power and privilege. No, I am thinking of still making the person who failed to work to deal with the matter. Berkine, what? Are you saying that you're taking pity on someone who has failed twice already? It's certain that he'll just fail a 3rd time. Turnisha, well, I think so as well, but I was impressed by his enthusiasm. Ah yes, let me introduce him to everyone. Berkine. With these words, Berkine gently raised his thin, white hand. With a whooshing sound, a man with his whole body covered in blood fell down from somewhere. Allow me to introduce you, this is Kabuman's subordinate, Sir Krentos Berkine. Berkine, with a smile, Berkine raised his hand to introduce this man, the noble-born vampire who held connections to Earl Thomas Palpabek, currently letting out a small groan. His appearance could be summed up in one word, ghastly. All of the fingers on both of his hands had been pierced through by silver skewers, his legs were covered in burn marks as if he had been roasted in a fire, and the flesh on his back was covered in countless protuberances. One of those protuberances appeared to burst. A mouse with no skin or fur crawled out from within and began to eat into Sir Krent's nearby flesh. And then once it had eaten a quantity of flesh equivalent to the size of its own body, it pushed its head into the hole it had created and returned beneath Sir Krent's skin. This was one of High-Hierarch's curses. Forgive me this, I will definitely, Sir Krent. As Sir Krent mustered his strength and looked up, the vampires looking at him gasped. He had no face. His eyes had been gouged out, his nose sliced off, his cheeks dug out and his lips torn to pieces. His head was like a skull that was covered in blood. The cruelest thing about all this was that none of the things that had been inflicted upon him, including the curse, were fatal. Noble-born vampires possessed incredible vitality and regenerative capabilities, they wouldn't die even after having this done to them. Even the noble-born vampires who had transcended the limits of mortality were nothing but playthings for Berkine. As they were reminded of this fact, the other vampires fell silent. The mice that were made of flesh continued consuming Sir Krent's tissues as they regenerated. Turnisha rose from her seat, approached him and kicked him in the face with all her strength. Sir Krent, Berkine? What are you planning on having this half-dead bastard do? He wouldn't even be able to kill a single caterpillar. Turnisha. Sir Krent was in agony after his jaw was crushed by Turnisha's kick. Indeed, he looked more like a pitiful criminal on death row awaiting execution than an assassin. With all due respect, I would say that Turnisha-sama is right. I believe it would be impossible for this person to cross the boundary mountain range, find the target, get through hundreds of ghouls and dispose of the damp. Female vampire. This remark was made by a female vampire who shared Turnisha's opinion. The other vampires seemed to be in agreement as well. Though differences existed between individuals, vampires were a powerful race. If one were to only look at the pure breeds, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were the strongest among all the races that Veda had created. They could slaughter dragons with ease. One pure breed vampire could destroy an entire nation on his own. The only ones capable of opposing them would be a party of adventurers of A class or higher, equipped with legendary class magic items. However, Serkrent was a noble-born vampire, a being considerably inferior to a pure breed. Even so, he would be a great threat to knights or adventurers, but there were plenty of monsters on his level of strength in the Boundary Mountain range. Anyone trying to cross the Boundary Mountain range high in the sky would encounter the monsters inhabiting the Devil's Nests in the skies, the Devil's Skies. They would be considered as challengers to the fight for domination over the air and be torn to pieces. But crawling across the steep mountain surface like a human would take time, and there were still no guarantees that one would make it through the journey safely. Monsters were overflowing from the unknown Devil's Nests and unexplored dungeons. They would attempt to devour any outsiders. In order to avoid that, hundreds of warriors strong enough to ignore monsters and capable of fighting while climbing the steep cliffs would need to be gathered, and they would have to travel in a large group while intimidating the surrounding monsters to deter them from attacking. No matter how one thought about it, it was impossible. Unless a god and his followers were to act directly, or some incredible trick was used, this could not be done. Not only would Serkrent have to cross the mountain range, but he would have to follow the Damp's tracks, slip through the sight of the hundreds of ghouls that had survived the journey and kill the Damp. If Serkrent could at least complete that mission, the vampires here couldn't care less whether he lived or died, but it would be problematic if he were to die before completing it. There is no problem. Serkrent said that he would even go as far as to risk his life to complete his mission. Isn't that right, Serkrent-kun? Berkine, Yash. Liefert Tome? Serkrent immediately responded to Berkine's question with his shredded tongue and crushed jaw. The other vampires were secretly amazed that he was still capable of hearing despite having no ears. I don't give a shit about his willpower or motivation. What I'm trying to say is that I can't trust his ability. Turnisha, what you are saying is completely reasonable, Turnisha. That is why I am thinking of dispatching one of my lovers for this. Berkine, huh? One of your prostitutes? Turnisha. The vampires began to murmur. Their faces expressed uncontrollable fear and disgust. Vampires were generally very proud. They would never make an effort to raise someone of the same rank above themselves. The reason subordinate and noble-born vampires formed a hierarchy was because the ones at the bottom of the hierarchy would be treated as slaves. At least, this was true for the vampires who had come to follow the evil gods. And Berkine greatly enjoyed watching this hierarchical process. It was a hobby to him. Even things like torture were nothing but casual pastimes compared to this. The noble-born and subordinate vampires that he had turned into his subordinates, he would make them compete and fight amongst each other. He would make them crush each other and draw each other's blood, granting his favor to the victorious and bestowing severe punishments onto the defeated. He was saying that he would have one of his lovers, one of his own bodyguards, work with Serkrent. Eleonora, you will do this for me, won't you? Berkine, a beautiful woman with red hair that came down to her waist, appeared from within Berkine's shadow. If she were to appear at a ball, noblemen experienced in giving compliments would exhaust their vocabulary to praise her beauty from the depths of their hearts. She was wearing a smile that would instantly make any man fall in love with her. Yes, please leave it to me. Eleonora, Fufu, make sure you get along with Serkrent-kun and the others. Also, the ruins of Tailashime are nearby, so it would be very helpful for you to collect the bones of the Sword King Borkus if they are still around. That would allow me to have Gabumonomi a second favor. Berkine, certainly, my beloved lord. Eleonora. While she was the youngest among Berkine's subordinates, having only become a noble-born vampire several years ago, she was a talented woman who had established herself as one of the best. It was expected that in a few hundred years' time, she would become one of the most powerful followers of the evil god of joyful life other than the pure-breed vampires themselves. Even Turnisha had killed several of her own subordinates out of irritation at the fact that they would never reach her level. Be careful to not let your guard down and go through a painful experience. Turnisha, it would be even better if Eleonora and the Damper simply killed each other. As Turnisha spoke these words that concealed her true feelings, the discussion regarding this topic came to an end. What came afterwards was a regular meeting with the same contents as usual: how the guilds hiding in the shadows were doing, the recent movements of Mage's church, how the conflict to become the heir of the Hartnett family of earls was intensifying, the exchange of information that would help the vampires pass the time during the long night, reports on the status of various projects. Finally, candidates to become subordinate vampires were introduced. Once they were acknowledged, they underwent the process to transform into vampires, and then the meeting was adjourned. There were 4 dungeons in the Devil's Nests surrounding Taylorsheim. They were Garen's Valley, Duran's Aquatic Cavern, Balkus's Subdragon Savannah and Barajan's Fall Life Mountain. All of them were dungeons that imitated natural environments, but the materials obtained from these dungeons had supported Taylorsheim's prosperity. Vandali had decided to clear the one with the lowest difficulty among them, the D-class dungeon, Garen's Valley. It would likely be about as difficult as the dungeon that he had entered in the Mage Shield Nation, or so Vandali thought, but this had been a training ground for Taylorsheim's inexperienced adventurers and one of the sources of Taylorsheim's prosperity. Garen's Valley was a place where rock salt and stone could be obtained. The rock salt in particular had been particularly important, since Taylorsheim was located in an inland area surrounded by a mountain range. It wouldn't have developed into anything more than a small village without this salt. Vandali was currently on the first floor of Garen's Valley. The members with him were the usual cast with the exception of Bazdia having replaced Sam. Jai. Ga. He was fighting one-on-one against a goblin soldier armed with a short spear. Though the goblin's movements were poor in Bazdia's eyes, it did have some degree of technique as it thrust its spear towards Vandali repeatedly. Vandali used martial arts with some degree of technique to repel the thrusts and tried a counter-attack with his claws. Jayajya. His attack was dodged and the spear was thrust towards him again. This crude exchange continued. Though it was suspenseful to watch if one remembered that it was a battle between a 3-year-old child and a monster, if one thought of it as a warrior fighting another, it would be yawn-inducing. There were dozens of goblin soldier corpses all around them. The one who had done this was not Vandali, but Bone Man, Bazdia and the others. They had slaughtered an entire group of goblin soldiers except one to allow Vandali to take it on. How is Bochin's talent for unarmed combat? Saria, as Saria asked Bazdia this question while wiping the blood from her halberd. Bazdia replied, I don't know how to put it. I've said this to Van before, that he has an aptitude for this. So much that it makes me excited. But I feel like it would be wrong to call it talent. Bazdia, so does that mean that he does have talent? Saria, he has better memory than me, so he will probably surpass me soon, won't he, Nay-san? Rita. Saria thought hard about Bazdia's words. As Rita said, it seemed to her that Vandali had good memory. They were now undead living high-leg armor and a living bikini armor. But while they were alive, they had been maids, and thought they had used a broom for cleaning. They had never wielded halberds or naginators or shot monsters to death with bows and arrows. Thus, they were reliant on the increased attribute values that they had obtained from becoming monsters to wield their weapons. They had received the instruction of Vigoro, who had told them that their movements were those of beginners, and they had made use of the fact that undead had no need for rest or sleep to train all night, every night. Through this, they had finally learned their skills. To them, Vandali seemed to be quick to learn things in comparison. He slept at night, and every week on his day off, he only did 1 hour of practice. Vandali was receiving the goblin soldiers' counterattacks and suffered injuries, but it couldn't be helped. Unlike Saria and Rita, who were suits of armor, Vandali had a flesh body. Van has no hesitation, no fear, and he doesn't seem to be impatient at the moment. Bazdia, Jayu. Is that not a good thing? Bone Man was examining a goblin's corpse with the tip of his sword to see if a magic stone might come out. In response to his question, Bazdia replied, You're right. It's a good thing. Vigoro got angry at me plenty of times back in the day. He would tell me not to close my eyes, not to be scared, not to get impatient. Bazdia calmly recalled the times when she was still an amateur. She was now a rank 4 ghoul warrior, but, of course, that didn't mean that she had been strong right from the beginning. Because she had grown up in a dangerous devil's nest, she had gone through and overcome harsh training. The ghouls had no military exercises or anything of the sort. Instead, they had used Spartan-style training that emphasized practical experience, making the inexperienced fight against weak monsters such as goblins that had been captured alive. But even so, real battles and training are different things. When someone is facing an opponent that really intends to kill them, they wonder if this attack will be enough. What could happen if the attack is dodged, and this causes them to hesitate? Exposed to the bloodthirst-filled gaze and attacks of their enemy, they fear being wounded or killed. Unable to display their ability in real battle as they do in training, they become impatient. Is that how it was? Saria: I might get the impatience part. Rita: yeah, I don't know about the hesitation or fear, but I do understand the impatience part. Saria: it seemed that the undead didn't have much sympathy for that. However, their senses were different from those of living creatures, so that was to be expected. But Van doesn't have any of those. Basdia: Vandally attacked with no hesitation, received attacks with no fear of pain and counter-attacked patiently. Basdia had asked him whether he was simply covering it up with his expressionlessness, but it seemed that he really felt no hesitation or anything else. The worst thing that can happen is me being injured. I won't die from something like that, anyway. Vandally had the danger sense, death spell constantly active, so he could sense how likely it was that he would die. The bloodthirst of his enemies was just another danger. It seemed that he was also able to ignore pain. He wasn't dulling his senses, but rather, delaying them. I've experienced far more painful things in my previous life. Vandally, it seemed that he had learned a way to divert his attention from pain in his previous life. This was further supported by the high-speed regeneration ability he possessed as a damper and the no-attribute spell, healing power enhancement. And because he knew that he would simply feel a little pain even if he failed, he felt no impatience. Even if his fingers or legs were cut off, he would simply need to pick them up and reattach them. That would be problematic for his eyes, so he would be careful about those. That's why he does things like that. Basdia. As Basdia said this, the goblin soldier's short spear pierced Vandali's arm. Saria: wah. Botchan. Rita: grrr. Bone Wolf. Rita and the others panicked, but Vandali remained composed. That was only to be expected. He had used his arm as a shield against an attack that he had decided that he couldn't avoid. The goblin soldier smiled and tried to pull his spear out, but that was the cause of his downfall. Phew. Vandali, with strength that seemed impossible for a 3-year-old body, Vandali moved his arm that still had the spear piercing it and broke the goblin soldier's stance. Jaya Jaya. And then as the goblin soldier fell forward, he dug out the goblin soldier's side with his claws. With blood spurting from its wound and its mouth, the goblin soldier became yet another corpse on the ground. Phew, a failure. Vandali. With these words, Vandali pulled the spear out of his arm, cast sterilization and healed the wound. It wasn't a failure. What would we do if you were to die? Saria: if I recall, humans die if they lose too much blood, don't they? Rita: J. Bonebird: calm down, I'm not going to die. Sorry. Vandali apologized, trying to calm Saria and the others down. This was why Basdia was kept on her toes when watching him, and it was difficult to get angry at him as well. I'm sorry. I couldn't complete my attacks and I lost my footing because I tripped over one of the corpses on the ground, so I couldn't avoid my enemy's attack. I used my arm as a shield to avoid a more serious wound. Next time, I will use my claws to deflect the spear or defeat my enemy before such a thing can happen. Vandali. For Vandali, using his arm as a shield was an action he took to avoid the worst possible outcome, something that couldn't be helped. But even so, he knew that it wasn't pleasant for those close to him to see that, and if he was scolded harshly, he would fall into a panicked state. Good, make sure to be more careful next time. Basdia. And so after Basdia said those words, she settled on teaching him what he should have done in that situation. Vandali was aware of his own lack of ability, so once he gained the skills that he was lacking, he would no longer need to do such reckless things. Basdia thought this, as did Vigoro and Zadiris, who heard about these things from her. Nobody allowed their own bodies to be wounded because they enjoyed it. Even Vandali felt the sensation of pain. If there was a way to survive and win without being wounded, he would definitely choose a method that allowed him to avoid pain. In fact, Zadiris and Vigoro, who were stronger than him, had fought through battles and been forced to do absurd, rash things to somehow survive. Zadiris in particular had pushed herself like that only to be rescued by Vandali. So, Van, I'm going to have you raise your skill quickly. After a short rest, we're moving on to the next. Basdia. So Vandali would have to learn some proper skills while they were still on a floor where he could get away with pushing himself. Isn't the pace a little fast? Vandali. It's not. Basdia. Then am I allowed to use magic? Vandali. You want to get stronger, don't you? Do your best, Van Basdia. At the very least, can I do a normal ambush or surprise attack instead of facing them head on? Vandali. You won't learn the techniques if you do that, right? You have to fight Bazdia. It wouldn't make for good training for Vandali if he were to use magic, and Vandali was not yet skilled enough to combine both magic and martial arts while fighting. Making use of his high attribute values, he would be able to kill a goblin soldier in one hit with a surprise attack, but then he wouldn't learn the essential skills he needed. And above all, men needed to be strong. I heard from Kuka that wives raise not only their children, but their husbands as well. Rest assured, Van. I'm going to raise you well, Bazdia. Yay, Vandali. Vandali was the one who had asked her to teach him unarmed combat because he wanted to be stronger, and he knew that this almost real combat training was an efficient way to learn. It's alright, Van. You can do it. Bazdia, yes. Vandali, and most importantly, Vandali was the type of person that was easily affected by praise. And so on this day, Vandali defeated 2 goblin soldiers, 1 kobold, 2 mini needle wolves and a goblin knight all on his own. You have acquired the unarmed fighting skill. Chapter 37, Can this be called clearing a dungeon? Gidya. Jih. Vandali avoided a goblin soldier's sword and gouged out the flesh of the side of its body with his claws. While the additional goblin behind it was panicking, he dashed up its body, grabbed a hold of its head and twisted it, breaking the bones of its neck. And then he continued to attack the goblin archers that were further behind. An arrow grazed his cheek lightly, but he wouldn't die from this. He ignored it as he charged in. The goblin archers panicked and drew their short swords to replace their bows, but Vandali hit them with the unarmed martial skill, fist strike. He felt the pleasant sensation of breaking their ribs and crushing their lungs through the furs they were wearing in place of armor. Another goblin archer fired an arrow at him from his blind spot. Feeling it with his danger sense, death, he used kicking strike against the ground to leap out of the way. Jai. And then he used kicking strike once again, charging towards the goblin before it could ready a second arrow. It struggled humorously to draw its short sword, but Vandali broke the goblin's leg with a kick and then crushed its neck with his foot as it collapsed. Phew. Vandali, making sure his enemy was properly finished and checking whether there were any more enemies around, Vandali exhaled. And as he regained his breath, he really appreciated one fact. Skills are amazing things. Vandali. He didn't feel it so much with magic-related skills, but every time he gained a new skill like unarmed fighting, carpentry and cooking, he realized just how amazing skills were. Vandali had never received combat-related training in either of his 2 previous lives on Earth and in Origin. The closest thing would perhaps be the judo that he did in his physical education classes. Even in real battles, he had never fought without the assistance of magic. But this was the result of 3 months of training. His enemies were goblin soldiers and goblin archers. Both were rank 2, they were not particularly strong enemies. But though they didn't possess skills, they were stronger than the average human and capable of using weapons. Vandali had managed to slaughter them all, sustaining only a scratch on his cheek. Yesterday, he had barely managed to kill a single goblin, using his own arm as a shield in the process. This was the effect that skills had. Obtaining the skill didn't mean that he suddenly gained some mysterious power. The same applied for his carpentry and cooking skills. He wasn't unconsciously, half-heartedly creating things and having them turn out well made. Take the unarmed fighting skill as an example. When he threw a punch, he understood how to make his fist strike hard and fast and moved his body according to that understanding. When he threw out a kick, he understood how to break the enemy's leg and moved his body according to that understanding. How to avoid the enemy's attacks, how to evade, how he should posture himself for a counterattack. He understood them all, and this allowed him to move his body accordingly. In the case of carpentry, he understood what he needed to do to make a good building, where he should put pillars to bear loads and how many he needed. As for cooking, he intuitively knew what he needed to do to make a more delicious meal. As to be expected of a system created by gods. Gods who did their work properly were truly wonderful. What was especially wonderful about it was that abilities could be quantified in numeric values. On Earth and in Origin, one would have to look at a person's past achievements and whatnot to determine how useful the person would be, but in Lambda, it could be done with one look at a person's status or at least the relevant skills for the field in question. Well, there was also the risk that the value of people would be determined solely based on the current skills they possessed. Good work, Botchan. Saria, splendidly done, my lord. Bone Man, Saria and Bone Man brought Vandali some water. I give you 80 points, Van. Bazdia, and Bazdia gave him a merciless grading. What are the reasons I lost points for? Vandally, the scratch on your cheek is 10 points, and relying on your martial skills too often is another 10 points. You wouldn't need to worry about running out of mana, Van, but if you use martial skills too many times consecutively, your brain will become unable to keep up. It's the same as when you use magic too many times in quick succession. Basdia, I see. Vandally, he had experienced multiple sudden fevers. It was easy to imagine that he would be easily killed without being able to put up any resistance if they occurred during battle. It wasn't a matter of mental strength, it was something that couldn't be avoided because people were creatures that required their brains to think. Vandally's mana exceeded 100 million, but his intelligence was just over 100. Even with their surpass limit skill, overusing martial skills might be a bad idea. Now then, from now on I'll learn how to fight while combining these skills with my magic. Vandally. The reason Vandally had chosen unarmed fighting out of the numerous available combat-related skills was because it suited him and he could make convenient use of his claws. His body was small and his limbs were short. No matter how much strength he had, it would not change this fact. Most of the weapons he had pillaged up until now were too large for him. The only weapons he could realistically use were a short sword, a short bow, a short spear and his own claws. A short sword would be exceptionally easy to carry and would work well as a hidden weapon, and in emergency situations, could even be thrown as a projectile. But it would have poor attacking power and one would need more speed than strength to wield it. Vandally's lowest attribute value was agility. Using a short bow would clearly be a bad idea. With a short bow's projectile range and killing power, it could simply be replaced by the use of mana bullets. A short spear was more appealing than the other two. Though it was short, the spear technique skill would govern its use and if Vandally learned the skill now, he could replace it with a longer weapon once his body grew larger. It wasn't a weapon that could be concealed, but Vandally wasn't really planning on becoming an assassin or anything, so he couldn't reject the idea based on that reason alone. But in the end, Vandally chose to use his claws. The claws were his own personal weapons that grew on all four of his limbs, and he could withdraw and extend them freely like a cat. They had short reach and they couldn't be thrown as projectile weapons, but he would always have access to them as long as his limbs weren't severed. The other reason was because it was possible that he had inherited a talent for claw-based unarmed combat from his father. Darso was happy about it and the decision was well received by Basdia and the other ghouls. Botchan is becoming more and more like a ghoul, isn't he? Saria, he might come to be known as the White Ghoul for long. Rita, Jiujiajiu, if he were to apply deadly poison to his claws, he would become even more ghoul-like. Bone Man, Vandally had a feeling that this might become a new title. No, this might actually become a title placed on him by the Adventurers Guild labeling him as a monster to be exterminated. It would be problematic to be put on the wanted list of the Mage Shield Nation's guilds. Leaving that aside, the basic training is over. Now let's raise our levels while we clear the dungeon. It seems that we've hunted down almost all of the monsters on this floor, anyway. Basdia. And so they continued on for a little while, passed through some stairs leading further underground and descended to the second floor. Vandally was in the middle of the formation, with Bone Man and Basdia in front. Bone Wolf, Bone Bear and Bone Monkey were positioned at the sides. Saria and Rita were positioned at the back, having switched from their long melee weapons to bows. Bone Bird was keeping a lookout from above. Garen's Valley was a dungeon that mimicked the structure of a natural valley, from the first floor all the way to the bottom floor. Because of this, there were passages that were split into multiple paths by boulders and things, but even so, it was no exaggeration to say that the dungeon's layout was simple and linear, and there were almost no traps. This was one of the reasons this place was suitable for the inexperienced to learn. Oh, it's the king. Black Goblin. Yo, king. Black Goblin. Because it was suitable for the inexperienced, the Black Goblin children were undergoing training in real battles here with the undead titans acting as their teachers. How are you feeling, king? Braga. Half a year had passed since Braga had been born, and he was now a fully grown adult. Vandally looked up at him as he replied. I learned a skill and Basdia gave me 80 points. Vandally. As Vandally said this proudly, the corners of Braga's mouth rose in a smile as he answered. That's amazing considering you're still so small. You're doing well, king. Braga. Vandally's head was patted roughly. He was being praised, but for some reason, he found it hard to believe that this was praise. I suppose this is the feeling of watching your childhood friends become adults while you're the only one to stay as a child. What an empty, painful, uneasy feeling. Vandally. Don't talk nonsense, king. I'm a goblin and you're a damp. Braga. Vandali was startled as he suddenly became aware of his unusual emotional state. But it was as Braga said, there was a difference in how children of different races developed. And though Braga was taller than Vandali, as a black goblin, his height only reached up to an adult human's chest. One day in the future, Vandali would be able to look down at Braga once more, right? Oh yeah, how is your training, Braga? Vandali, I learned tons of skills. Short swordsmanship, short spear technique, silent steps, detect presence. I'm already over level 80. Braga, you were amazing. I'll be overtaken in no time. Vandali, as Braga held his chest out in pride, Vandali used flight to pat his head back. You're a black goblin after all, Braga. Like normal goblins and kobolds, you mature quickly. It's like your growth period is condensed together, so now is your time to grow. Vandali, for monsters like black goblins that reached adulthood in less than a year after birth, their growth occurred during a short, condensed time period. So they seemed to grow stronger the more they trained during that period. You have to do your best and increase your rank. If you don't, it'll be difficult to earn your keep by hunting the monsters around here in the future. Vandali, the black goblins were rank 2. The majority of the monsters that appeared around Taylorsheim were rank 3 or above. Though they would have friends and weapons to help them, hunting monsters in a stable manner with their current strength would be difficult. So strict. But it's true, so I'll do my best. Braga was training hard because he understood this. As they were now, they might be able to scrape by, living as assistants for the undead titans or ghouls. Or perhaps they could try their hand at agriculture, though they might find it difficult. But they were monsters, they felt an instinctual desire to grow stronger. See you, King. Once we clear this place, we'll go on an adventure. Braga, yeah, an adventure. Vandali, exchanging a firm handshake with Vandali, Braga returned to his training. Incidentally, it seemed that Braga and the other black goblins didn't hesitate at all to kill the goblins appearing in the dungeon. Those are enemies. That one sentence summarized it all. Since the second and third floors of the dungeon were being used by the black goblins for their combat training, Vandali's party didn't encounter many enemies here. They didn't mind, however, as only rank 2 monsters appeared in the earlier floors of the dungeon, making them unsuitable to gain many experience points. And on the 4th floor, it was not the black goblins but the Anubis receiving combat training here. Gawa. A young Anubis wielding a spear was facing off against a baboon-like rank 3 monster. They bared their fangs at each other menacingly. As if deciding that a fight was inevitable, the baboon used all 4 limbs to climb a nearby cliff, trying to take the high ground. Yuan. Anubis, the young Anubis somehow dashed up the cliff after it with just his legs, using the spear in his hand to attack the baboon. Jaiwa. With a high-pitched scream, the baboon fell onto the ground on his back. The Anubis leapt down after it, crushing its neck with his foot. It was a magnificent victory. Yuan. What did you think of my hunt, King? Anubis, you've become strong, haven't you? You'd probably be able to hunt any rank 3 monster now, Zemodo. Vandali, the young Anubis was Zemodo, born around the same time as Braga. His appearance was now considerably different from how it had been during his childhood. His head resembled the impressive, tough-looking head of a German shepherd, and from the neck down, his body was that of a lean-muscled man with attractive, dark-colored skin. He was tall as well, nobody would look at him and think that he was younger than Vandali. No, I've still got a long way to go. And being rank 3 in this place means that I'm still weak. Even if I'm going to be working with others to hunt, I want to become stronger. Zemodo, multiple weak individuals could combine their strength to hunt strong prey. However, it was only natural to think that it would be better if strong individuals combined their strength to hunt even stronger prey. It seemed that Zemodo had set his sights on the higher objective. More importantly, I have something I want to ask you about. It's about Memodiga. Zemodo, did something happen to her? Vandali, it seemed that there was something about Zemodo's twin sister Memodiga, who had grown to adulthood just like him and Braga, that was troubling him. It seemed that she had been behaving strangely lately. She wears a necklace made of a monster's bone or fang that someone gave her, and whenever I go to talk to her during our breaks, she disappears somewhere recently. She's been spending all of her time with that Berg guy. Zemodo, isn't she just getting to that age? Vandali, it seemed that Memodiga had started accompanying another Anubis by the name of Berg-kun. Quite impressive for a younger guy, though he was only a month younger than her. It seemed true that girls were more mature than boys. Vandali wanted to congratulate her. What? Is Memodiga intending to have Berg's child? Zemodo. It seemed like quite a leap of logic to go from accompaniment to baby making. No, perhaps not. They were monsters living in the world of Lambda, after all. It's still too early. We're still young. Zemodo, as someone who had grown up as a Japanese person on Earth, he agreed with Zemodo, but that isn't true. It isn't uncommon in human society for people to get married as soon as they come of age. Saria, and even if you say that it is too early, she isn't a child anymore. If you keep saying things like that, she will miss her chance to get married. Rita, so said the living Armor sisters. The view on marriage in this world was that people should get married and have children while they were young. Though this world's underdeveloped medical knowledge was compensated for by the existence of magic, only noblemen, wealthy merchants and high-ranking adventurers could afford to pay fees for the mage's services. The same had been true in the past in Japan and other countries as well. This was fairly normal. That's right. The important question for a woman is whose child she wants to bear. If Memodiga wants to have Berg's child, you should be supporting her. Bazdia showed how the ghouls thought of the relationships between men and women. Women gave birth to children and raised them in the village. Was this a heavy or light responsibility, considering the standards of modern Japan? Though the men had no responsibilities as fathers, as long as they were members of the village, they had to hunt enough food for more than themselves. In ghoul societies, it wasn't acceptable for men to become reliant on the women. Life might be harsh for men who couldn't fight. Jaya Bone Man, Bone Wolf. As if unconcerned with this, Bone Man and the others were keeping an eye on their surroundings. Well, even if they were consulted, they would likely give answers based on their knowledge as animals, so this was likely for the best. Is that so, Zim? Well, perhaps the best thing to do would be to tell them to wait until Berg becomes able to hunt prey? Vandally, things might be difficult for Siscons in this world as well. And so the journey through the fourth floor continued peacefully. Incidentally, the baboon's liver and kidneys could be used as potion ingredients. Unfortunately, there was nobody running an apothecary, so they couldn't be used, however. And on the fifth floor, a joint training between the other Anubises and the ghouls who were still rank 3 was taking place. Ga, G-R-R-R-R. Words in the ghouls' battle language were shouted, and in the blink of an eye, a rock python that resembled numerous boulders linked together began to take damage. The giant snake that possessed a rock-like defense was still just prey when faced with the coordinated efforts between the Anubises and the ghouls. Viscous mud created with magic was used to trap it, and then spears, swords and claws were twisted into the gaps in its skin until it stopped moving. And despite its rocky exterior, the flesh underneath was tender when cooked and tasted similar to chicken tenderloins. King, how do you like my earth attribute magic? Memodiga, the female Anubis with a German shepherd's head approached Vandally, waving her staff back and forth. The viscous mud that had stopped the rock python's movements had been created by her magic. It was very good. Vandally, it was a simple but reliable and useful spell in battle. Many spells of the earth attribute were like this. Only a very small portion of mages could do things like causing volcanic eruptions, manipulating lava like their own limbs, or creating fissures in the ground to swallow up their enemies. Most earth attribute mages were proficient at spells that did things like digging pitfalls and causing hard spikes to grow out of the ground. So considering the special characteristics of earth attribute magic, Memodiga was using it well. Most living creatures couldn't separate themselves from the ground, so her magic was very effective. But Vandally was thinking about something different as he looked up at her. Her shining eyes, long ears, moist nose, white fangs, magnificent fur, skin that was just as beautiful as her fur, her generously sized chest, tight hips, and the tail that was wagging happily back and forth. Memodiga had been cute as a small child, but now she had become a beautiful woman. Vandally had heard that one feels a little proud when their childhood friend becomes a beautiful woman, so he realized that this was the emotion that he was feeling as he looked at her. It was easy to understand that she would have a boyfriend. What's wrong, King? Memodiga, no, it's nothing. Come to think of it, I saw Zemodo on the 4th floor. Are you not getting along with him these days? Vandally, that's right. Listen, Nissan is just annoying, complaining about every little thing. Memodiga, after that, Vandally heard enough of her complaints to think, this is a common thing that happens during puberty. But I do understand that Nissan is just worried about me. Still, I think it'd be fine if he would trust me more. Memadiga, ah yeah, I wonder if things would be fine if you two just talked to each other sometime. Things might become too intense with just the two of you, so maybe include someone else in the conversation as well. Vandali, you're right. Well then, I'll ask Berg-Memadiga, someone other than Berg. Vandali, bringing Berg would only cause a scene of carnage. Normal goblins and kobolds didn't understand human language, but the reason Memadiga, Braga and the other children could speak so fluently was because they had learned the language from Vandali and the ghouls. This was not a particularly special case. Monsters of a certain intelligence tamed by tamers could learn human language. Only a very small number of non-humanoid monsters were capable of having conversations, however. After dealing with Memadiga's problems, Vandali's party descended the stairs after not running into many battles on the 5th floor. And on the 6th floor was where Garen's Valley really began industrially. Cut it. Rock cutter. The undead titans were cutting square blocks of bright white rock out of the stone cliffs. They were the stonemasons of Talersheim. White rock could be mined from the rock walls on the 6th floor of Garen's Valley. It was similar to Earth's marble, but perhaps because it originated from a dungeon, it was a higher quality stone that contained mana. Apparently through some secret processing technique, it could be turned into products that were harder than marble and more resistant to wear. When Talersheim had first started trading with the Hartner Duchy in the Orborm Kingdom, the Titans were apparently surprised by the high price that they could sell the stone for. But that trading had long since come to an end, and Vandali had already restored the royal castle, the town and the walls back to normal. So there shouldn't have been much demand for more stone, however. Look who it is. Have you come to the dungeon for training, oh holy son? New Arza. Standing there was New Arza, wearing metal armor and holding a shield and a mace that looked as if could crush someone's skull like an egg. His appearance was rather unlich-like. Yes. What are you and the others doing here, New Arza? Vandali, we have come to be in need of some stone. New Arza. Vandali's golem transmutation could be used to combine broken fragments of stone to reuse it. However, he couldn't make new stone out of nothing. But why would new stone be needed? Could it be because I made too many reversi sets? Vandali, had he gone overboard by making 100 reversi sets because everyone had liked it? No, that is not the case, oh holy son. But I would like to request that you make 100 more sets when it is convenient for you to do so. New Arza. The reversi sets, Jenga sets and frisbees that Vandali had created were currently very popular in Talersheim. The fact that everyone was so deprived of entertainment that they themselves hadn't realized it was one reason, but the fact that all of them had simple rules that could be learned quickly made them very well received. Thus, owning a reversi or Jenga set had become something of a status symbol. Vandali was getting worried that their popularity had gone overboard. It wasn't as if Vandali was being paid to make the sets, nor did it take much effort to make them. Giving it some more thought, he decided it wasn't a problem. And if possible, I would also like to request more Jenga sets and frisbees. New Arza. I don't think you need to ask me to make them. Vandali, anyone should be able to make these. No, there is some meaning behind them being created by your hands, holy son. New Arza. It seemed that receiving Vandali's handmade toys were like receiving an award for the undead. Even though they weren't such amazing creations. Had he created a brand name without realizing? I understand. Vandali, but if they were so happy about it, he would make plenty for them. Now that he thought about it, he wasn't paying the undead titans or ghouls salaries or anything, so it was fine to do at least this much for them. So what is this stone going to be used for? Vandali, the plaza in front of the royal castle is empty, is it not? We thought that we would erect a stone statue there. New Arza. A stone statue. That would be nice. Vandali, the arts make the mind rich. The minds of undead in particular were often more important than their bodies, so it was important for them to have stable minds. Yes, we have planned for the stone statue of the Holy Sun to be completed by next spring. New Arza. Are you serious? Vandali, I am serious. You are the Holy Son of two prophecies, after all. For those of us who desire the restoration of the goddess Vida, you are someone to be worshipped, Holy Son. New Arza. I suddenly don't really want to go outside anymore. Vandali. Of course, Vandali didn't feel negative feelings about being treated favorably, but would it be alright for him to go so far beyond that and become a religious symbol? Well, it wasn't as if his face had the words Sian the Holy Son written on it, so it would be fine as long as he kept his mouth shut about it when he went to the Orborm Kingdom. misfortune, it's something to look forward to, isn't it? Rita, noblemen should keep at least one self-portrait or stone statue of themselves, so you shouldn't feel so opposed to it. Saria, are there any noblemen who would have a stone statue of themselves erected in the plaza in front of the royal castle? Vandali, upon being asked this, Ritu and Saria averted their gazes, so Vandali had a rough idea of how it was. The sisters showed plenty of expressions, even though they didn't have heads. Ooh, which means that there are none. In other words, you are the only one, my lord. Jayu, my congratulations to you. Bone Man congratulated Vandali sincerely. Well, it was fine. It wasn't like anyone would be coming to Talersheim. The only ones who would see it would be the undead titans, ghouls and those of the newer races that Vandali had created. Well then, we shall be carrying this stone out, so excuse us. New Aza. With those words, New Aza and the other undead titans set about carrying the stone out of the dungeon. They would be protecting the stone that weighed tons and preventing it from being destroyed by attacking monsters on the way to the surface. The monsters wouldn't deliberately aim to attack the stone, but if an attack happened to hit it, the stone would be cracked. Fuga. Orcus, we'll protect the materials for King's stone statue. Orcus, so more reverse sets for us, too. Orcus, Gorba and the other Orcuses were in charge of guarding the stone. Unlike the Anubises and Black Goblins, they had not yet reached adulthood, but they already possessed enough skills and physical strength to somehow deal with rank 3 monsters. In other words, this was perfect training for them. I'll make them after I'm done here. Come to think of it, won't it be hard to carry the stone up the stairs? Vandali, don't you worry about it. We have something called know-how. Titan, it seemed that there were various things they could use, including a magic item that turned stairs into a slope. And between the undead titans who didn't feel fatigue and the Orcuses, though they were still children, there was plenty of physical strength to be used. Worrying about them would be pointless. Parting with New Aza and the others, Vandali's party continued on, but perhaps the monsters had been cleared preemptively so that the stone mining wouldn't be interrupted. There were almost no monsters appearing on the 6th floor. Why did we pass through here again? To observe everyone? Vandali, I know how you feel, but I'm sure there are still plenty of monsters beneath here. Let's keep going, Van. Basdia. Chapter 38, The Dungeon Boss is Disappointing. The 7th floor of Garen's Valley. The reason the Titan population had grown to over 5,000 and prospered enough to build a city-nation was in this place. The rock salt. Mine the rock salt. Titan. There aren't any monsters to hinder us, are there? Titan. Searching for the enemy, all clear. Titan. Indeed, high-quality rock salt could be harvested from the cliffs on this floor. Salt was an important product, a necessity. Talersheim had relied on this dungeon as its salt supply. In this land trapped inside a mountain range containing numerous devil's nests, there was no trading with outside nations until the tunnel leading to the Orborm Kingdom was discovered. Reaching the sea would have required the Titans to journey through multiple devil's nests. Thus, the 7th floor of Garen's Valley had been the only place that salt could be obtained. If the Titans had never discovered this dungeon, Talersheim wouldn't have existed and the Titan population would have remained in the hundreds. Of course, this was still a part of the dungeon, so monsters would still appear. And since the monsters appearing on this 7th floor were rank 4, not 3, it was more dangerous than the 6th floor. Monkeys that possessed rocky carapaces, rock monkeys. Kobold mages able to cast spells and kobold generals capable of using martial skills. And stone golems that were even larger than the Titans. All of these were monsters that would require at least middle-class adventurers to take them on. The way the Titans had mined salt from such a dangerous place was to have the laborers become at least as proficient in battle as middle-class adventurers. I won't let you interfere with our mining. Titan, the armored, pickaxe-wielding laborers fighting heroically against monsters had been a sight to behold, and later when adventurers from the Orborm Kingdom came to Talersheim for trading, they were told that the miners didn't need escorts. That hadn't changed even after the Titans had become undead. Miso. The source of miso. Titan, I want fish sauce. Titan, if any monsters get in our way, we'll fry them in miso and eat them. Titan, no, perhaps they were even more ferocious than they had been in the past. The idea that undead do not eat is a misconception. It is true that lowly skeletons and ghosts do not feel hunger or possess a sense of taste. However, zombies and undead of a certain rank and above feel hunger and have a sense of taste. Of course, As the biological processes of undead have stopped, they do not need to eat. They have no problems continuing to function even if they do not eat for years at a time. However, they cannot escape the restrictions of having once been living creatures entirely. They still retain some of their primitive needs. Out of the three main needs, the need for sleep is the one that disappears entirely. Undead do not tire, so they do not need sleep. If they try to sleep they can reach a state similar to being asleep, but this is carried out in order to recover from mental fatigue rather than physical, and is done more for self-satisfaction. Interestingly, the need to reproduce remains. As the body has already died, there is no desire to leave offspring behind, but the deed is still physically possible. It is carried out by some to absorb spirit from the living and by those that died with a strong liking for engaging in intercourse. And the need that remains in its entirety is hunger. This desire that remains in the souls of the undead drives zombies to eat the flesh of the living and drink their blood to absorb the mana contained within and gain experience. Skeletons and spirit-type undead can also increase their rank to become superior versions of undead, gain their spirit form skill to gain a replacement for flesh and consume the flesh and blood of the living or even absorb their vitality in a more direct way. The undead titans of Talersheim were no exception. They ate as much as they liked. Most of the food they had been eating was the flesh and blood of monsters brought into the city, but from time to time they also ate the surrounding grass, tree branches and rock fragments. But after Vandali and the ghouls had arrived, they had been eating tasty foods such as spit roasted meat, food baked in leaves and things covered in walnut and basil sauce. And the things that had recently made an impact among them were the fish sauce, walnut miso and a corn miso that Vandali had created. These were the seasonings that the champion Zakat had tried and failed to reproduce, things that hadn't existed in Lambda before. They had caused a culture shock on the Titans' tongues and one by one, they had charmed those who tasted it. Miso 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 meisu Titan, fish say use. Titan, my head hurts. I'm seeing things. Miso, give me miso Titan, perhaps it was just an addiction. Van, could it be that those seasonings you made have addictive properties? Bazdia, no, at least, they shouldn't. Right? Vandali answered Bazdia's question with his eyes fixed on the Titans who were mining the salt in a bloodshot-eyed frenzy, but it was clear even with his expressionless face that he had no confidence in that answer. I think I made it with the same recipe as on Earth, and I never heard of the fermented foods I created with death attribute magic in origin having any addictive properties. No, maybe I just didn't know about it? Or maybe the walnuts and acorns I used contained compounds that I don't know about, and that's what's causing these strange effects. Vandali, even father was delighted with its taste. Isn't it possible that it is just very delicious? Saria, Sam had recently increased the level of his spirit form skill and had become able to taste food. Saria suggested a possibility based on Sam's reaction when he had first tried the miso. It's unfair for only father to be eating it, isn't it? Rita. The dissatisfied Rita and Saria were indeed suits of living armor with no mouths. They were still unable to eat or taste food. I wonder if that's true. Well, the one called Baj who was saying that his head hurts apparently has hallucinations regularly, so it might be. Vandali, Van, I can't really feel at ease about that. Is Baj alright? Bazdia, who knows? Apparently while he was alive, his hands would start shaking if he ran out of alcohol, so I think there is nothing that can be done about it. Vandali, even if you consume alcohol, do not allow it to consume you. Saria, yeah, I'll make sure not to drink too much alcohol. Vandali, as Vandali said this, they passed by the undead titans who were spiritedly mining the rock salt and decided to set up camp for the night on the 7th floor. What Vandali could really call a dungeon clearing began from the 8th floor. There was nobody training on this floor, nor were there any undead titans mining rocks and salt, so they could encounter monsters with normal frequency. And in Garen's Valley, where the floors had fundamentally simple layouts, it was impossible to hide from the monsters unless the entire party was made of scouting-type members like thieves or someone was capable of using illusion magic. Botchan. I thought these were those rock-like monkeys, but they are just stone golems. Saria, they're so hard, can't you do something about them with golem transmutation? Bazdia, no, I can only manipulate golems I created myself, so let's have Bone Monkey and the others mow them down. Vandali, Bone Monkey, from this floor onwards, multiple rank 3 monsters could appear simultaneously. There was a difference between golems that had only numbers with no coordination and groups of kobold knights or kobold archers that had excellent coordination, but the battle was definitely more difficult than any encounter on the 7th floor. You. Bone Monkey. If an average adventurer were to face the stone golems that Bone Monkey had beaten down, they would find it to be a considerably difficult battle. D-class adventurers might think that it would be fine if they just used their weapons, but using weapons consumes mana. Many frontline fighting adventurers do not possess an abundant amount of mana. In that regard, Vandali and his party possessed more than enough strength to clear Garen's Valley. All of them were rank 4 and above except for Vandali. And if he really needed to, Vandali would simply make use of his vast mana pool to push his way through. In fact, it could be said that there was no way that they would have difficulty in this dungeon. Phew, the feeling of gaining experience points for the first time in about 2 years is quite pleasant. Vandali, well, if he had to risk his life every time he wanted to gain experience points, no number of lives would be enough, so this was perfect. Jaya, my lord, how is your level? Bone Man, I still haven't even reached level 10. Vandali, however, the amount of crucial experience points that he could gain was only this much. Vandali currently possessed the Death attribute Mage job, but it seemed that leveling up this job was difficult. He still hadn't reached level 10 yet. How about you, Bazdia? Vandali, I underwent a job change from apprentice warrior to warrior, and now I'm level 14. Bazdia, let's ask Balkus and the others when we return to Talersheim. Vandali, Balkus would likely know whether different jobs required different amounts of experience points to level up. He was an A-class adventurer who had been praised as Thesord King. He had lost his job after becoming an undead, but there was no doubt that he had mastered several jobs beginning from an apprentice job. Since that was something that happened about 200 years ago, it was possible that he had lost his memories regarding that. However, my attribute values are increasing, though only little by little, so let's proceed without being too impatient. Vandali, how much have they increased by? Saria, each of my attribute values have increased by 1 to 10 points. My mana has increased by about 2%. Vandali, I see. There is still a long way to go, isn't there? Saria, if we're talking about your mana, it's increased by 2 million? It never fails to amaze me. Bastia, Vandali continued fighting the monsters that appeared with everyone else, holding back so that he didn't deal the killing blow. Unable to gain experience points independently. Curse was truly inconvenient. Incidentally, this curse still allowed him to gain around 1/10 of the experience points earned by his allies and servants, and he had gained a general understanding of the conditions for this. It seemed that the fundamental requirement was that Vandali's allies or servants gained experience within his field of vision. Borrowing Bonebeard's vision to watch Bone Man defeating monsters in a faraway location did not gain Vandali experience points. It seemed the condition wasn't met if Vandali didn't witness it with his own eyes. Apparently there were no binoculars or telescopes in Lambda. Would using those to see further perhaps not count? What if he was wearing vision-correcting glasses? There were apparently magic items that acted as glasses for farsightedness, so Vandali had decided to test them out if he ever obtained such an item. Depending on the results of such a test, Vandali's eyes might become an important lifeline for him, so this needed to be verified as soon as possible. He didn't know how to create binoculars or a telescope, so he couldn't test those, however. But if I made golems out of glass, maybe I could at least create lenses? If their magnification is low, then perhaps Vandali, It's dangerous to contemplate things in the middle of battle. Bastia, it's alright, I'm finished now. Vandali, Yugije? Monster, even finishing off the occasional enemy himself to increase his soon-armed fighting skill, Vandali finally reached the 10th floor. This was the deepest floor in Garen's Valley. A rock gorilla even larger than a titan let out a roar, baring its fangs. It made loud, crashing sounds by drumming its thick chest with its fists as an intimidation tactic. It was rank 4, but it was one of the more powerful rank 4 monsters. It had no special abilities, but it was as hard and strong as it appeared, and was actually more intelligent than its appearance suggested. It was capable of casting multiple earth element spells. However, it's weak for the big boss of a D-class dungeon, isn't it? Vandali, so it seems. It's probably a mid-boss. Bastia, as if aware that Vandali and Bastia were insulting it, the rock gorilla let out a short roar and ran towards them on all fours at a speed that they hadn't expected considering its appearance. Bone Monkey stood in its way to prevent it from reaching them. A monkey of bone and a monkey of rock collided with a crash. Boo. Bone Monkey's bones creaked. They were even in physical strength, but the rock gorilla who had flesh covered in a carapace had an advantage over Bone Monkey who was made of only bones and a little spirit form. Phew. Rockerilla. Confident in its victory, the Rockerilla let out a strangely human-like sneer. Boo-oo-oo-oo. Bone Monkey. As it sneered, it took Bone Monkey's poisonous breath directly in the face. Vujich. Rockerilla. With its eyes and nose that weren't protected by its carapace struck by the poison, the Rockerilla let go of Bone Monkey and clutched its face. Ga. Gru-oo-oo-oo. Taya. The resulting events were very one-sided. The Rockerilla was certainly a powerful monster, even for a rank 4. However, looking at it another way, its strength could not even match a rank 5 monster. But it was facing 8 rank 4 monsters. Basdia didn't step into the fight, but even so, it was more of a lynching than a battle. If the Rockerilla had kept its distance without charging in and used its earth attribute magic as its primary way of attacking, it could have at least put up a proper fight. However, perhaps because of the dungeon's influence, it had become more ferocious and aggressive. After defeating the Rockerilla, Vandali cast Disinfect to remove the poison. Its magic stone was collected. Its meat that had a strong, peculiar taste but made a good soup when boiled with herbs was collected, sterilization and bug killer were cast on its organs, and these became ingredients for today's lunch. Also, the carapace could be used as a catalyst to create armor that granted increased resistance to earth attribute magic, so they took that with them as well. After casting preservation on these harvested materials, Vandali turned them into a flesh golem and had them move on their own. With this, Vandali's party could maintain their mobility while proceeding through this dangerous dungeon. More effort was needed to guard the mass of materials that had been turned into a flesh golem and preventing it from eaten by monsters, but since the party had many members, it was not really a problem. Now then, shall we go down? Vandali. Garen's Valley had originally been a shallow, D-class dungeon with 10 floors. However, perhaps because it had been abandoned for over 200 years, there were 3 more floors. That was why a mid-boss had appeared here. Dungeons with 11 or more floors spawn mid-bosses. They appear roughly every 10 floors, and they are known as mid-bosses because they are stronger than regular monsters but not as powerful as bosses. For example, a dungeon with 27 floors would have a mid-boss appearing on the 10th and 20th floors, and then the boss on the 27th floor. It is common for an adventurer party in the midst of clearing a dungeon that has never been cleared yet defeating a powerful enemy and thinking, this was definitely the boss of this dungeon, only to discover a staircase leading further down instead of a treasure storage chamber, revealing that the powerful enemy they defeated was merely a mid-boss. I heard from Borkus and the others that once you defeat a mid-boss, the difficulty of the dungeon increases. Let's proceed with caution, everyone. Bastia, yeah? With renewed enthusiasm, Vandali's party descended to the 11th floor. From the 11th floor onwards, rank 4 monsters leading rank 3 monsters appeared. They were all groups of monsters that coordinated well with their allies, such as kobold knights led by a kobold mage and rock monkeys under the command of a rockerilla. And on the 13th floor, multiple rank 4 monsters began to appear simultaneously. Even Vandali's party began having some difficulty dealing with these. When they encountered a group of hellhounds that kept their distance and spat flaming breath attacks at them, Vandali fired several mana bullets at them, turning some of them into lumps of meat, knowing that some of the experience points and materials would go to waste. When multiple rockulums appeared at once, everyone had to go all out with the use of their martial skills and then recover their mana through Vandali's mana transfer afterwards. And there was the occasional trap laid out starting from the 11th floor. A triggered trap had caused a boulder to fall down on them, but Vandali held nothing back as he used his mana to crush it. The boulder wouldn't have given them experience points either way. However, they were able to gather a considerable harvest from the treasure chests that had begun to appear. Even though the dungeon is close to Taylorsheim, the weapons inside the treasure chests are human-sized. Vandali, looking at the handle of a steel sword, it was clearly a human-sized broadsword rather than a titan-sized short sword. This was a dungeon in a land inhabited by no people other than titans for the past 100,000 years. Why did the treasure chests contain weapons for human use? As Vandali wondered this, Bastia, who had been into multiple dungeons, explained why. This is the first time I've gone this deep into a dungeon, but I've heard that this isn't that uncommon. Bastia, adventurers had discovered that the contents of treasure chests in dungeons change depending on the person who opened it and that person's allies. Of course, it isn't as if dungeons understand what the adventurers want and prepare it for them inside the chests. They simply change the size and specifications of the item. For example, a party made entirely of titans would find titan-sized weapons and armor. Conversely, if a party was made entirely of dwarves whose height only reaches a human's chest, they would find dwarf-sized equipment. A dwarf party wouldn't find titan-sized armor inside a treasure chest, or vice versa. There is a theory that evil gods had created the dungeons and made it like this to tempt adventurers more easily. There is another explanation that the genie Ricalant, who created the dungeons for people to use as places to train, made it this way to provide more motivation for those who used them. It's true that nobody would be tempted or have any motivation to get treasures that didn't meet their needs. Well, it's convenient, so either explanation is fine for me. Vandally shared the thoughts of many adventurers in regard to the and the monsters that appeared in the boss chamber of the 13th floor were an orc general and 4 orc knights. I thought it would definitely be some kind of rocky monster. Vandally, what will we do, Botchan? Saria, what will we do? You say there's no way we will leave without defeating them, right? Vandally, none of them could hide their disappointment, as they had killed plenty of orcs during the winter of this year. Unaware of this, the orc general became enraged with the pride of a dungeon boss, but it was an easy victory for Vandally and his party. Well, it is rank 5, so I did get a lot of experience points. Their meat tastes good and I was thinking of getting some lard, so it's perfect, I suppose. Vandally, but even the pack of hellhounds was more of a tough battle. Bastia, you're right. Vandally, the party was in strangely low spirits as they harvested the treasure from the treasure storage chamber. The undead titans and ghouls had been forming parties together and clearing this dungeon over and over recently, so it was nothing outstanding. Furthermore, the Adventurers Guild of 200 years ago had installed items that allowed teleportation in each of Taylorsheim's dungeons. These items allowed them to return from the treasure storage room to the surface in an instant. Depending on the dungeon, they apparently allowed one to return to the surface from any floor or teleport from the surface to any previously visited floor. What a convenient world this was. Basdia has become a rank 5 ghoul Amazonas. How was the dungeon clearing, boy? Zadyrus, Vandally had returned to Taylorsheim and was taking a bath in the royal castle when Zadyrus came in. It was alright, mother. Van is currently able to defeat a kobold knight without using his magic. Bastia, who was in the bath with him, answered for him. If one were to ask why this had become a mixed bath, the reason was because Vigoro had revealed that he had discovered Vandally with his head completely submerged in the water. The idea that allowing Vandally to bathe on his own would be dangerous was shared by everyone, so it had been decided that someone should be in the bath with him at all times. It was often Vigoro or Borkus accompanying him, but this time, the two of them were busy clearing a different dungeon. Both Bastia and Zadyrus were aware that Vandally possessed the memories of his previous life and the one before that, having lived for 40 years in total, but perhaps the concept of shyness was different in ghoul culture. They showed no signs of embarrassment at all. Well, my appearance is that of a 3-year-old and my physical body is actually that of a 3-year-old, so I suppose they don't feel anything. Vandally, he was sharing a bath with a tall, outstandingly beautiful woman and a beautiful young girl. The Vandally who had lived on Earth would have been staring at them with bloodshot eyes, suffered from a nosebleed from the excitement, or perhaps he might have curled into a ball and averted his eyes instead. After Bastia left the dungeon, her rank had suddenly increased and she had become a ghoul Amazonas. It was a race that had never been reached by anyone in her village, but Vandally thought that the word Amazonas suited her. In fact, her increased attribute values were apparently suited for a warrior. Her rank had likely increased because she had reached level 100 and met the requirements of leveling up multiple martial-type skills. Though Bastia's appearance hadn't changed much, red tattoo-like patterns that looked as if they might have magical properties had appeared on her body. As tattoos, they looked cool. Though they made her look more impressive, they also seemed to highlight her abundant curves. Zadyrus looked like a young girl, but she had a charming appearance probably. With his 3-year-old eyes, Vandally didn't have the confidence to say for sure. Even so, he knew that she was lovely and pretty. But perhaps his mind was affected by the age of his body. He thought nothing other than Komoa, there naked. His heart didn't begin throbbing, nor did he feel any arousal. He was still at an age where most children would be unaware of things happening around them, and even his first love was still at least 2 or 3 years away, so this was how things were for now. Could it be that 10 years from now, he would regret not taking a better look? That is quite impressive. Zadyrus, yeah? His skill is still level 1, but that's probably because he receives no bonuses to the skill from his job. His magic looked as if it had become stronger than before as well. Bastia, come to think of it, it seems that your rank has increased as well. These patterns that look as if they may be related to magic have appeared on your body. Have you finally decided to learn magic? Zadyrus, it seems that this is how Gulamazanuses are. Maybe because of these patterns, I've gained resistance to magic. I don't know if they have any other effect, but magic, I'll think about it after I have a child. Bastia, that reminds me, how is the magic item? It should increase the chance of a successful pregnancy when worn. Vandally, the 3-year-old boy casually changed the topic of conversation to baby making. It seemed that the problem of ghoul fertility would be solved with the distribution of these magic items, but it was true that they couldn't become careless yet if things went too well and too many children were born. They might face problems as there were no nurseries here, unlike on Earth. Vandally asked the question with this in mind, but Basdia turned pale. It isn't going well. Both my partner and I have been wearing the magic items, but Basdia, it seemed that they were simply not having an effect. The magic items only made the egg cells and sperm survive about as long as those of humans, giving ghouls the same chance of becoming pregnant as humans, but that didn't mean that they guaranteed pregnancy. Considering that, it wasn't strange for her to still not be pregnant yet. Even healthy human couples sometimes took some time to conceive. Well then, I'll use a spirit form to have a look just in case, shall I? Vandally, however, it was possible that there was some kind of problem. It was probably best to investigate it when there was time. Thanks, I'm counting on you. Bastia, it's fine. I promised that I would spend a week in the city after I came back from the dungeon, and I've also promised that I'll be making some more reversi sets later today. Vandally, it seems that you have not forgotten about your promises with us. That is good, in more than one way. Zadyrus, rules had been decided to prevent Vandally from becoming a black worker again. Chapter 39, with honor and fame, without land or a successor. That's the kind of nobleman I want to be. I want coffee milk. Vandally. Vandally whispered this as he got out of the bath and remembered a promise that he had made at a bathhouse on Earth. Apparently there was coffee in Lambda, but it wasn't a major drink, it seemed to be a drink for only a small portion of the wealthy. The wealthy. In other words, celebrities, the bourgeoisie. Thinking about that only made him want to drink it more. Wouldn't there be coffee trees growing somewhere? Basking in the breeze created by an electric fan-shaped column that he had made himself, he remembered that coffee could be replaced by dandelion roots. I wonder if I can make it using the dandelions in this world. Well, if I find any, I'll give it a try. Vandally, he had been unable to drink coffee at some point on Earth because his uncle had declared that coffee was a luxury, so he had read a book in his middle school's library called Edible Wildflowers in the City and tried it out. If it turned out to be delicious in this world as well, he would recommend it to everyone. Now then, I guess it's time to go. Stop spinning. Vandally, ordering the electric fan-shaped column to stop spinning, Vandally left the bathhouse to begin the medical examination of Basdia's body. Incidentally, the dandelion coffee that Vandally would create in the future would turn out to be not very delicious, perhaps because the plant itself differed from the dandelions on Earth. It did not become popular in Talersheim. However, he made electric fan-shaped columns from the surplus wood that could obey certain commands such as rotating their propellers, setting their rotation speed to one of 3 levels and swaying left and right across a bed. These became popular in Talersheim instead. Now then, I'll start the medical examination. Vandally, yeah, I'm counting on you. Bastia, wearing a white fur in place of a white doctor's gown, Vandally immediately used spirit form transformation on his arms, which then penetrated Basdia's body as she was lying down. It was his first time examining Basdia with this method, but he had done it plenty of times to other ghouls, so he was very accustomed to doing this. Maybe it's because her rank increased. Her body is the embodiment of health. Vandally, there were no problems with her blood vessels or the function of her major organs. In fact, everything was very vigorous. There was also no problem with her uterus. Vandally couldn't see any injuries, inflammation or disease. Could it be that pure coincidence or perhaps stress was the reason that she couldn't get pregnant? So he thought, but he checked her ovaries as well just in case. This is strange, what is this? Vandally, and then he felt a strong, uncomfortable feeling. What's wrong, Van? It seems that your hands have stopped. Basdia was enduring the sensation of some foreign objects creeping around inside her, but she noticed that Vandaly's behavior had changed and spoke out to him. I'm going to examine you a bit more, so tell me if it feels unpleasant. Vandali. As he said this, Vandali concentrated on examining her two ovaries. Normally, the ovaries and testes would contain strong signs of life. Vandali perceived that life as heat. With healthy ovaries and testes, touching them with his spirit form hands would even feel like plunging them into boiling water, but Basdia's ovaries didn't feel hot. Are her ovaries dead? No, it's not to that extent. But they're not functioning normally. Vandali. So what was causing this problem? Vandali examined them again, but there was no injury or disease. Vandali consulted his knowledge that he had learned on Earth and the information that he had overheard in Origin. Now that I think about it, those researchers did say that my death attribute magic contributed to the fields of obstetrics and gynecology. Vandali. They were unpleasant people who would constantly be muttering things in an indistinguishable tone and then shout at Vandali when he failed to hear them. Well, Vandali didn't care about the researchers right now. If I recall, abortion, contraception, prevention of sexually transmitted diseases are infertility treatment. Vandali. Though not every case had been successful, there had been some occasions in Origin where Vandali's death attribute magic had been used to treat infertility. There were numerous methods such as prolonging the life of the egg cells and sperm as the magic items that he had created for the ghouls did, and using Youth transformation in the egg cells. But there were also cases that were difficult to treat with death attribute magic. Basdia's case is one of those. If the egg cells aren't mature, they can't be fertilized. It would be simpler to treat this using life attribute magic. Vandali. The ovaries were functioning suboptimally and the egg cells were not maturing. With that being the case, it would just be a matter of using life attribute magic to make the ovaries work more vigorously, but Vandali possessed no aptitude for the life attribute. Fortunately, there were individuals capable of using life attribute magic in Talersheim, like New Arza. There was the option of asking him to help. However, there was a problem in that Vandali didn't know how knowledgeable New Arza was about physiology. Magic is strongly influenced by the caster's knowledge and imagination. If a mage who has spent his whole life in a country that is perpetually in the season of summer and a mage who has spent his whole life in a country with harsh winters were to both create ice using magic, the one from the snowy country would be able to do so more skillfully. In the same way, New Arza casting some vague magic without knowing how the organs function wouldn't be very effective. Vandali could teach New Arza what he knew, but unlike basic arithmetic, it would take time for New Arza to understand physiological concepts. Well then, I'll give it a try first, and if that doesn't work then I'll ask New Arza to help. Vandali. What are you saying about New Arza Uk? Basdia. This method was very roundabout and many steps would have to be followed. The gist of it was that Vandali would suck out the negative components of the ovaries and transfer his own vitality to them, making them function normally. Though the overall process would be difficult to control using life attribute magic, it would be completed in one step, while doing it with death attribute magic required the process to be divided into dozens of separate steps. Without Thegent revocation skill, it would likely take over an hour. I'll activate surpass limits. I wish I had 3 or at least 2 more brains. Vandali. He began complaining internally about the fact that his head was becoming feverish even with the use of surpass limits, but quickly put those thoughts aside. It feels kind of warm. Basdia. It's because of my rapid healing skill and healing power enhancement. Vandali. Even the process of transferring his vitality to her needed him to transform his arms with spirit form transformation, fuse them with Basdia and trick her body into thinking that they were a part of it, trigger his rapid healing skill and cast the no attribute spell healing power enhancement at the same time. Around 10 minutes passed and the rapid healing skill stopped. It seemed that things had healed for now. Both the left and right ovaries were now overflowing with enough vitality to burn Vandali's spirit form hands. Vandali wasn't sure whether they had completely recovered or whether the effects of this treatment were temporary, but it should be fine for at least a month. I finished treating you for now. Let's see how things go from here. Vandali. It's over, thanks. Basdia. With sweat on her face, Basdia let out a sigh of relief. As Zadaris had experienced when Vandali applied Youth transformation in her, it seemed that the sensation of his spirit form hands crawling around inside the body was not a pleasant one. I'll inspect you again in a month from now. If anything happens before then, let me know. Vandali. As Vandali said this, he felt a vague feeling that he had become a doctor. As this thought ran through his mind, his stomach growled. It seemed that this work had taken a toll on not only his mana, but his body as well. I'm hungry as well. Alright, I'll make something. We brought plenty of ingredients with us from the dungeon, after all. Bastia, I'm counting on you. Vandali, it had been several months since Vandali had become 3 years old, but Dasa still didn't allow him to cook using a fire even though he did possess the cooking skill. Vandali removed the wooden lid and gently lifted her out. With a wet cloth he had sterilized with disinfect, he wiped her smooth skin, taking care not to cause any scratches to it. Using sterilize would only kill microorganisms, it wouldn't remove any dust. Botchan, what are you doing? Sam, as you can see, I'm taking care of Zandia by hand. Vandali. Sam had an indescribably confused expression, but Vandali answered his question while caring for Zandia, of whom only the left hand and wrist remained. Now that I think about it, you've started to make quite a lot of different facial expressions, haven't you, Sam? Vandali. The previous Sam, the spirit form of Sam that had sat on the carriage, was mist in the shape of a person, and the horses pulling the carriage were only mist in the shape of horses. It had been impossible to distinguish any kind of facial expression. However, now that Sam's spirit form skill had leveled up, he definitely appeared to be a human at a glance, albeit one with pale skin and red eyes. Each hair of his beard had been reproduced realistically. If he wore a hat to cover his eyes, he would look just like a regular, pale-skinned person. The horses were the same. If they closed their red eyes, they would look like normal horses. No, they might appear too ominous to be called normal, but in any case, they did appear to be horses. Ha, thank you very much. More importantly, why are you performing such a noble deed? I would understand if it were an undead, but I do believe that it is but a hand. Sam, Vandali had cast preservation in the hand to prevent decomposition, but it wasn't undead or anything, it was still just a hand. Sam apparently found it strange that Vandali was taking care of it. If I didn't treat it well, she would get angry at me when we meet, won't she? Vandali, if Zandia had become a sentient undead, she wouldn't be pleased to learn that her hand had been treated poorly. That was why Vandali was caring for her hand. Hearing this, Sam gave a sigh of relief. So that is how it is. I had presumed that you might be the kind of person with a strong interest in certain body parts of the opposite sex, Botchan. Sam, no, I don't have a fetish for hands. Vandali, what an outrageous misunderstanding. Vandali didn't have a taste for such things. I see. I have heard that there are many noblemen who have peculiar tastes, so I thought that perhaps Sam, if anything, Father, Botchan prefers muscles. Saria, the problem is that we don't have either muscles or hands. Our hands are pieces of armor, after all. Rita, it seemed that noblemen were sinful people in this world as well. Speaking of noblemen, there's something I wanted to confirm. Dasa spoke as she smoothly appeared and joined the conversation. Mom, I definitely feel hesitant to be discussing things like this with you. Vandali, not that. I mean regarding the kind of nobleman that you want to be in the future. Dasa, that side of things, huh? Vandali breathed a sigh of relief. You said that you'll make a child with Bastia when you become an adult. Are you serious about that? Dasa, he had breathed that sigh of relief too early. I was thinking that things might turn out that way. Vandali, in any case, Vandali was still in a 3-year-old's body, unable to feel lust or feelings of love, so he wasn't sure. But he was thinking that things would end up that way in more than 10 years from now. He thought well of Bastia, she was beautiful and he didn't feel any negative feelings at being desired by such a person. She was a member of a different race, but Vandali himself was a child of mixed blood. It was apparently possible for them to have children, so he couldn't see a reason to refuse. He had always yearned for a warm family, anyway. Don't get me wrong, I think that Bastia is a great person too. She's sturdy, and I can believe that she would protect you, Vandali. Dasa, yes. Vandali felt a strange desire to object, but considering that he was a young child and Bastia was a Gulamazinus, he understood that this was easy to imagine. But I think that many people would loudly disapprove of that if you wanted to become a nobleman. The Orborm Kingdom is much more tolerant than the Amid Empire, but there will be people who hate dampers as well. Dasa, it seemed that Dasa was concerned with the events leading up to and after Vandali becoming a nobleman. Indeed, when Vandali thought about it, it might become a problem if Vandali were to have a child with ghouls who were treated as monsters by human society. There had been people who would start baseless rumors even on Earth, and there would be some who would be displeased with a damper becoming a nobleman. There would also be problems regarding succession. Saria, as Saria said, having children would directly lead to having problems with succession. This was only natural, as noble families were families that continued generation after generation. And whether the Orborn kingdom would accept the possibility of a half-ghoul child being the next generation's successor to Vandali's family was largely questionable. Of course, even after Vandali became a nobleman, neither he nor Bazdia would think of making their child a nobleman as well, but there would be those who would make a fuss over the mere possibility even if Vandali himself didn't desire that. Vandali had never given this proper thought or consideration, but he had something of an idea. About that, I'll alter my course and aim to be not a nobleman, but an honorary nobleman. Vandali, if I recall, honorary noblemen are noblemen only for one generation who cannot be succeeded, right? Dasa, yes, it is a title bestowed to people who were made noblemen because of their achievements and those who cannot succeed their noble families due to being born after the first son. Sam, as Dasa and Sam said, honorary noblemen were noblemen who could not have a successor. They generally did not govern over land and would receive an annuity for the rest of their lives, but they were mostly noblemen only in title. But this only in title nobility would be convenient for Vandali. Would you be content with that, Botjan? Well, most people would consider that to be a great success in life. Sam, I've heard that the annuity that such noblemen would receive is several times the income of a normal person, but Dasa, this was how honorary noblemen were generally treated. There were plenty of stories of individuals who had strived to become noblemen but only managed to become honorary noblemen. Yes, because just receiving an annuity without having land, an official position or a successor is much more convenient. Vandali, naturally, Vandali had no need for land. He had no knowledge of how to make a region prosper. He could simply find and employ a reliable vassal to do it for him, but doing that on his own would be difficult. No matter how he thought about it, he could only imagine that it would be more than he could handle. He did think that he would be able to do various things with golem transmutation if he owned land with people living in it, however. An official position would be too much to handle as well. Vandali had lived for around 40 years in total, but he had no experience in regards to society. He could probably fill the position if someone taught him how, but he couldn't imagine that it would be enjoyable work. As for having a successor, when he had seen how long Damper's lifespans were at the Adventurers Guild before, he had thought, that would be impossible. He estimated that he would live for 3,000 years as long as he wasn't killed. There was no way that he would become a nobleman that would be succeeded. That was why he was aiming to be an honorary nobleman. He would have no land, official position or successors. But those around him would still respect him as a nobleman. It would also be much easier to reach this position than a court rank where he would have land and require a successor. The reason I wanted to become a nobleman was so that the guys who will be reincarnating here from origin will hesitate to kill me, and because I want enough money to live in luxury. I'm alright with being either a nobleman or an honorary nobleman as long as I have the reputation that comes with it. Vandali, what will you do to gain the required sum of money? Sam, I'm thinking I can just earn it normally as an adventurer. Let's do our best, everyone. Vandali, even just the materials that they had obtained from clearing Garen's Valley today would sell for a considerable amount at an adventurer's guild. Vandali figured that if he could earn this much as a 3-year-old, he would eventually be able to earn more than a lowly nobleman if he continued working hard. And I'm sure that giving up my nobility would also be simple if I were an honorary nobleman. Vandali, eh? You're going to give it up? Saria, yes. I think I'll consider it once I come to an understanding with the others who will be reincarnated. Vandali, for Vandali, gaining the status of nobility was nothing more than a means to an end. It was true that being a nobleman would be convenient. It would certainly feel good to exercise his influence and special rights, and he had no doubt that there would be delicious foods that only noblemen could eat, high-quality goods that only noblemen could obtain and pieces of art that only noblemen could see. But what if the burdens of being a nobleman became greater than those privileges? What would he do if it hindered his interactions with the ghouls and undead, or he were to get involved in some troublesome power struggle? It was simple. He would simply return the tool that had already served its purpose. A nobleman wouldn't be able to give up his position easily if he is in charge of land with people living in it, but an honorary nobleman wouldn't have responsibilities or anything. I would just need to give up my position, stay low for 100 years or so and then wait for things to calm down. Vandali, Sam and his daughters were at a loss for words. In this world, noblemen were special people, they were treated as completely different creatures even if they were members of the same race. In fact, there were more than a few noblemen that wouldn't hesitate to say that they were superior beings to commoners. It's certainly exactly as you say. That's amazing, Vandali. To think that you had put so much thought into it. I'm seeing you in a new light now, Dasa. Dasa's reaction was like this, but only because she had been raised in a dark elf village whose society was nothing like an aristocracy. For those like Sam and his daughters who had once served noblemen, Vandali's view on things was astounding. But this was something that Vandali could say because he possessed the values of modern Japan. He wouldn't go as far as to say that all of humanity were like brothers and sisters, but he would only give a scornful laugh at those who said that noblemen were beings who were superior to commoners. Sam and his daughters were still completely silent, and Vandali became worried that his statement based on his own values had caused them unpleasant feelings. "I see, as expected of you, Botchan. Sam." But it seemed that this wasn't the case. As Sam opened his mouth to speak after having been completely still for a while, he seemed to have a deeply moved expression on his face. "So you are saying that the status of being a nobleman would be nothing but a hindrance to you, Botchan? Sam, eh?" "Vandali, it is just as the goddess prophesied. An extraordinary individual must have extraordinary ambitions. Saria, Vanadli, and you even said that you are the holy son to Borkus-san. So you really are planning to use Taylorsheim as a foothold to unite the entire continent? Rita, you're joking or teasing me, aren't you? Vandali, it's a continent? Rita, you're joking or teasing me, aren't you? Vandali, it somehow seemed that there were various independent rumors and exaggerated truths. I don't plan to do anything that outrageous, thought Vandali as he scratched his head. Even if he were to do something like that, at most, it would be the restoration of Taylorsheim. I'm sure it will be fine. Vandali is the type who grows when people praise him. Given 1,000 years, I'm sure that he'll be able to unite the continent. Dasa, I think you're a little too patient. Vandali didn't feel any enthusiasm for the idea of spending 1,000 years uniting the continent. The continent wouldn't be unified so easily, anyway. Things don't always go as planned in life, but Vandali thought that becoming an honorary nobleman was a reasonable goal. The next day, Borkus's party still hadn't returned, so Vandali joined Zadiris and her group in training, deciding to ask questions about jobs later. Since you are joining us today, boy, we will be doing special training. Zadiris, they were outside Taylorsheim's walls. The ghoul mages led by Zadiris, the black goblins and the Anubises including Memadiga were gathered here. Now then, we will begin training with the aim of acquiring Thechant Revocation skill. Zadiris, everyone gave a cheer. Thechant Revocation skill is a skill that allows the user to cast spells without the necessary incantations. The effects of this skill could be described in one word as tremendous. It removes the need for the actions normally taken to cast spell, causing spells to require no time to prepare. It allows for consecutive casts of spells that pushes the caster's mana and intelligence to their limits and even removes the risk of a spell's incantation of giving away which spell is being cast or being interrupted to make the spell misfire. It is a remarkably more difficult skill to acquire than Thechant Reduction skill that shortens the time needed to make an incantation, but its effect is also remarkably different. But the method of learning the skill is exceedingly simple. One simply needs to continue casting spells without incantations. But casting a spell without an incantation consumes at least several hundred times the amount of mana and produces an effect that is less than 1/10 of the original spell. Even skilled mages cannot perform this task repeatedly. And so Zadiris and the others were casting spells silently to try and learn this skill. A light resembling that of a firefly so small that it was almost invisible in the sunlight appeared at Zadiris's fingertip. Small droplets of water appeared at the fingertips of the ghouls and undead titans to dampen their surroundings. Pinky fingertip-sized flames appeared and vanished and small gusts of wind blew around them. As this process was repeated, one by one, they ran out of mana. We're counting on you, boy. Zadiris, okay. Vandali had been watching up until now, but now he used spirit form transformation in his arms and changed their shape so that they became bundles of tubes. And as these pipes reached the mages, his mana pool of over 100 million was poured into them through mana transfer. This was the crucial point of the training. Zadiris and the others lacked mana, so even if they did training to learn Thechant Revocation skill, it would take far too long for them to achieve their goal. And for Vandali to do the training of using up his entire mana pool of over 100 million to increase its size, it would normally take more than an entire day. And so Vandali was providing their mages with mana. This allowed Vandali to quickly and easily use up all of his mana. Alright, we will continue the training. Zadiris, with this method, the mages could perform 10 days worth of training to gain Thechant Revocation skill in a single day. The problem was, I'm surprisingly free. Vandali, the problem was that he didn't get the feeling that he was training just by acting as a mana source, so he seemed quite free. If he crossed his legs and meditated, then perhaps it would seem more like training. Name, Basgia rank, 5 race, Gulamazinus level, 0 job, warrior job level, 24 job history, apprentice warrior age, 27 years old passive skills, night vision superhuman strength, level 4, level up. Pain resistance, level 2 paralyzing venom secretion, claws, level 3 magic resistance, level 1, new. Intuition, level 1, new. Active skills, axe technique, level 4, level up. Shield technique, level 3, level up. Archery, level 3, level up. Throwing, level 3, level up. Silent steps, level 2, level up. Coordination, level 3, level up. Status effects, infertility completely recovered. Monster explanation, Gulamazinus. When a ghoul woman with qualities suited for magic learns and diligently studies martial skills instead of magic and continues to do so after becoming a ghoul warrior, she can increase her rank and become this race. There is no significant change in appearance, but tattoo-like patterns appear on the body. Physical ability increases significantly and the patterns on the body grant the magic resistance skill and enhances inherent magic-oriented qualities. As it is a considerably rare race, there are never 2 Gulamazinuses in a single village. They typically act as leaders of groups and groups with a Gulamazinus tend to have other women in powerful positions. It is said that there are groups of ghouls entirely made of women led by a Gulamazinus in the depths of some devil's nests, though this has not been confirmed. It is unknown what Gulamazinuses become if they increase their rank further. No such case has been confirmed up until now. However, it can be assumed that individuals who master not only martial skills but magic as well may increase their rank to become an even superior race. Chapter 40. Human society is in good shape, but more importantly, I want seaweed. The region ruled by Viscount Balches was experiencing an unexpected period of prosperity. This was
Alrighty guys, so here we are again, and just added some few more colors, some a bit of a flavor on the background. Got a bit it's not that as what I expected, but it's still doing its job of adding a bit of flavor on the design. Now looking at this part, it does really have some few things that need to be fixed. This part is kind of too hard on this. Maybe lessen this dark brown stuff. Let's see if I can use this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's better, I think. So yeah, I'll just get rid of some of the stuff that I added that are a bit too strong, like this. Okay. And okay, I'm not gonna spend a lot more time on this, but because it's kind of late in my time right now. But yeah, this stuff right here right now is really good. As I thought, it won't be it won't be it won't be the last stream for this one. I'll add more stuff next stream, because I wasn't expecting I would spend a lot of time in the coloring the beach. The water is kind of complicated in coloring because it's kind of hard to predict what part of it should be moving, should be not, and yeah. Well, I do lack of experience in creating or painting the the color of the water, but I do enjoy creating this. Mhm. The more practice I will do with water, maybe I'll make this quite faster compared to what I'm doing here, what I did here. And yeah, I'll just if you notice earlier, I kind of got rid of some of the line arts that are messing around the canvas, and it's partially clean right now. The character, uh, yeah, I'll probably get rid some of the line arts also that are a bit dirty, especially the weapon part needs a bit of cleaning. Hmm. So yeah, okay. So far, so good. Next week, I hope that I can finish this already, so I can move on to other projects that I'm planning, or maybe do a training arc. I'm gonna buy uh, a pack for what you call it, a tutorial pack, so that I can learn more of the digital painting and try to apply it on my design. Hmm. So far, is this right here? Okay, it is. Man, this is a mess. I think okay, here we go. That's cleaner. So yeah, if you notice, my system is a bit laggy because I'm recording also the process in Clip Studio Paint. It has a built-in recorder, so I can make a wonderful short video of me coloring this and post it on YouTube once I'm done. But so far, right now, we're still not. So probably next week, hopefully this is done already, and I can upload some few more stuff in my channel. Okay, so yeah, enough with the design. About the story so far, yeah, we're still at a phase at the point where there's not a lot of combats happening because he's still in the training and he's learning some new stuff about his skills and about his new job, and hopefully that we can get to the part where he is about to fight against some of the bad guys, because that would be very interesting. And I also enjoyed that they already introduced the vampires at the very first chapter that we read today. So those vampires are going to attack him because it's like a big taboo for them to give birth to dampers. So they're on a hunt right now, and let's see what will happen if they reach the place where Vandalay is right now. Let's see if what they can do, or if Vandalay has some few tricks on his sleeves that will get rid of the vampires quickly. But of course, he's the main character, so we won't need to worry about him. It's kind of, you know, uh, the plot of most of the shonen genre anime and manga stuff. Don't expect the main character to die immediately. So, yeah. But there will be very interesting stuff that will happen. And, yeah, so far, the things that they've been discussing, yeah, those pretty much they've been training right now. Him going to the dungeon. Uh, yeah. So, not very much is happening. But we'll see next stream. Maybe we can finally have some few more actions now that he's a, he's a bit learned of the new skills that he has already applied in his uh, his skills. Okay. Anyways, so thank you very much again, guys, for watching this video. If you're watching this on my archive, and please leave a like and subscribe if you like it. And also, mm, please give me some advice if you are an artist or have some good
observation skills when it comes to painting or art design and perspective. If you can give me some advice, it will be very helpful. Because I'm still in the training arc right now for my grinding of digital art. So hopefully that whatever your advice you will give to me, I can apply it to my skills also. Anyways, thank you again for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys again next time. So here is your boy Shrimp, the Prodigal Shrimp, and I'm signing off. Thank you again.